Jared Nelson. I grew up in Mill Creek, Washington. I came to California when I was 18, right after high school. Figured I would go to school in San Diego, enjoy the sun. It was cheap when I moved here, which was a big motivator too. And then I fell in love with it here. Yeah, I love to cook. I write. I act. My story. My story for this, I think, it centers around a decision to live authentically, and I found myself at 33 years old, the wife with 3 children with this idyllic life, and I was miserable. I was depressed, and I didn't know why. There were times I couldn't get out of bed in the morning. I just had no motivation to live. It was, I think, for people that have chronic depression, they can relate to this feeling of just hopelessness. What is there anything in my future worth? Am I worth anything?
You're making good money?
I was making good money, not great money, but I had a very normal, what would be considered a successful life.
What were you doing?
I was working for one of the nation's largest home builders, a developer. I was in sales. I was had a 6-figure income. We were comfortable. We had a house in a nice neighborhood, a minivan, a dog. Kids were involved in sports. We just had that life. Not super, super religious, but we went to church. Like there was a feeling of stability and kind of that, the life that's supposed to make one happy. And I think I'd achieved that, but I was miserable. The story goes back a little bit further when my ex-wife was first pregnant. I freaked out a little bit and went to see a therapist who suggested, this is normal. I was 22 years old. Like, you're about to have a kid, your life's going to change. Maybe you should go on some medication. So I went on an antidepressant, which made me anxious. So I went on an anti-anxiety medication. So this cocktail of drugs was in my system, and it did mellow me out. It kind of numbed me comfortably in the middle, and I wasn't super depressed anymore. That went on for 10 years. And in that 10-year period, I had 2 more children. Life continues. Everything's, fine. Ups and downs in the economy, whatever, more or less. We never worried about putting food on the table and where we were going to live. So I decided at 33 that I didn't want to be on medication anymore. I wanted to be healthier. And I'd been drinking a lot. I was overweight. So I started getting healthy. I started exercising, dieting, stopped drinking, and started weaning myself off the medication. And it was within a couple of months of being weaned off this medication, these familiar feelings that I kept suppressing my whole life kept coming to the surface of my mind. This fear that I was gay, or at the time, I must be bisexual, and I never really explored that side of me. And I have a wife, I have kids. I'd never been with a guy, but why do these feelings keep coming up, and why do they keep getting stronger? So I sought therapy, a new therapist. I would be attracted to guys. Like, I would be attracted to specific people. It wasn't just this broad, lusting after every guy that I saw. And it wasn't even like a really sexual, I don't know. It was a weird feeling. It was like this desire to be close to specific people that I felt attracted to. I rationalized that my entire life by saying it was envy. I wanted to be like this person, or I wanted to be this person's friend because they were so popular or funny or cool or whatever. That kind of thing, right? But also coming from a background of a kind of conservative family, a family that believed in God and was moderately religious, I was terrified of this idea that I might not be straight. What does that mean? From my upbringing and my family's perspective, this is purely a decision people make in life to be gay or not, right? It's a lifestyle choice. And I knew I didn't want to be different. Who wants to be different? Like, especially, looking at... So I came to a point and I'm like, God, I saw this therapist. I said, things just keep coming up. These feelings keep coming up. And I think maybe if I just explored my sexuality a little bit in college, maybe I wouldn't feel this right now. Maybe I need to get this out of my system. That was a really nerve-wracking day. It's the first time I ever said anything close to I might be gay to a person, or even really acknowledged it to myself. So I talked to him. I remember saying that to him, saying that I think I'm bisexual. I'm just staring at the ground. I couldn't make eye contact. The shame was just like crippling. And he said, we're in a safe space, and I'd like to continue this conversation. You have to look at me if we're going to. I mean, even now, it just kind of... It was this visceral reaction based on shame.
Where do you feel? Here.
It's like in my chest, in my throat. Sorry.
Sorry. Take your time. I think
That was this big shift in
of course.
in my life. So that day, I would find out later that this therapist worked through his lunch. We went way over, but he could see this isn't something I can shut down at the 60-minute mark. So I left there with this empowering feeling of freedom. Like, Jesus, I finally said this, and it was exciting and terrifying at the same time as I, drove home to my family and my life and my wife and my children. These children for whom I'm supposed to be an example of a man, so really kind of complicated feelings sort of plagued me for the next few weeks. And I really looked forward to going back to this therapist and talking more. So as we discussed things over the next couple of weeks, it was very evident, oh my God, I'm gay. How did I not know this? How didn't I see this? Looking back as you're talking to somebody and he's asking questions, it's like all these things throughout my life, starting at puberty, taking me through today, it clear as day. How did I avoid all of this? It was kind of amazing what the human mind can believe. Whether you're in denial or whether you're in full belief of what you want to be and everyone says you're crazy, the mind is a really, really, really powerful tool. So at any rate, I was in therapy for a few months and I realized oh my God, I've got to tell my wife this. I was terrified. I love my wife. Yeah, I did. I mean, it's interesting, her specifically, I think what I was drawn to about her was the fact that she was not I don't want to say typical woman, because that sounds so condescending and patronizing, but she wasn't an emotional woman. She was very stoic and adventurous and didn't waste time on feelings. It's I don't know. She was the first woman that I was ever around where I really didn't get annoyed after a little while. I was enamored by her. And it was well, this is love. I mean, this is the first girl that I don't need space from. I just enjoy being around her all the time. So yeah, for sure there was this feeling of love. I mean, when I first came to this realization, it was fuck, I have to kill myself. This is I can't come out. What does that even mean? What are my parents going to think? What are my kids going to think? What's, that I left my wife and kids to go fuck men? That's what's going through my mind. So I thought to myself, well, I could either, if I could make this look like an accident, then no one will have to know. Life insurance will pay out and my kids will have a college fund covered and the mortgage will be, all these thoughts go through my mind. It was yeah, that's a really good idea. This thing happened that felt like divine intervention, where an acquaintance who I was not really close with, I ran into shortly after kind of coming to this conclusion that my only option was... And this guy said to me, and it was bizarre because he just kind of walked up to me and he said, "You're carrying all this weight and you don't even realize it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to him." And he just saunters off. I'm like, was that God talking to me? I mean, it was like really, it was life-changing. So it was like, okay, what would it look, talking to this therapist then, what would it look like if I came out? How would that go? Who knows? It could be really, really bad, and that's what I prepared myself for. I prepared myself for my family to turn their back on me and not want anything to do with me. I prepared myself emotionally, mentally for my wife to take my kids and never let me see them again. I mean, I got to this really horrible, horrible place that I think I really needed to get my mind around this could be the result. And if it's that, and if I'm still willing to go through with it, then I mean, it must be really important to try and none of those people, my family, my wife, my children, none of them have to live with these feelings. I mean, it seemed still at the time very selfish to me that I was about to ruin the lives of my kids in my mind and my wife, who I loved. It was a beautiful day. It was a beautiful summer day. And my office was right by my kids' school, and there was a big park next to the school. So she had suggested we have lunch in the park. So I went to have lunch with her in the park, and she said, I know something's going on with you. You've been seeing this therapist. You don't talk about it. You don't tell me what's going on. She's like, I can tell you're holding it together. And, it seems to me like everything's crumbling inside you. So, we're partners. I'm here for you. You can tell me anything, kind of thing. As it turns out, she thought I was having an affair with a woman. She thought I was sleeping with one of her friends. Which is not the case. So she told me that day, basically, I'm not going to have this conversation with you in a park. She goes, well, we can talk tonight, after the kids go to bed. So that was the day I knew I was going to tell her. I had not told anyone else besides my therapist. My best friend and was also my business partner, Jeremy, I went over to his house that afternoon. I called him and I just said, I really got to talk to you. And can I come by? He said, yeah. And I thought I was going to probably need a place to go. I thought she was going to kick me out when she found out and I would need a place to crash. I also kind of wanted to see how it sounded coming out of my mouth. So I told him, and I was terrified and I was shaking and I was crying and eye contact was a hard one. At that moment, everything that I needed, he was supportive. He was like a brother. He told me it was going to be okay. He was shocked. So I went home that night and had dinner, had this normal kind of evening. And I was aware that this is going to be the last normal night of any of these people's lives in my family, in my house. These innocent kids were about to have their whole lives derailed because of me. Could I really do this? And I had already come to the decision that I needed to do it. So I did. That night after the kids were asleep, she came out into the living room and we talked, and I told her, and it was hard. It was emotional. I told her about the suicidal ideation. I think she was scared that I might still do that. So to my surprise, she was very, very supportive. This is going to be okay. We're going to figure this out. She looked at me and said, okay, it's going to be okay. Which was surprising. I didn't believe it was going to be okay. She didn't kick me out of the house. I was surprised about that. She went through her own roller coaster of emotions and told me, we should stay together for the rest of this year, have one more Christmas as a family. And I was like, yeah, I was on board with that. It was just never going to happen. This was in August. And I mean, the emotional ups and downs of everything were they had taken their toll, and it was too much. So in September, we decided to tell my children, which was hard too. I mean, really hard. Telling them that we were going to get divorced was hard. Telling them why was, for me, I was still carrying, and still probably to this day carry shame and guilt over it.
How's your relationship with that now?
It's great now. I mean, it was all the things that I told myself were going to happen didn't happen. And I count myself very fortunate in that I had support of my family, my extended family, and my ex-wife and my children, everyone was kind of rallied around me, which was a shock and not what I expected, but it's also not everyone's experience. And I feel incredibly grateful that that was mine. So my relationship with my children was fine. I mean, in the aftermath of us splitting up, I was with my kids all the time. And we had a custody arrangement, but it was really kind of casual. And, my ex-wife had a job with odd hours, working nights sometimes, days sometimes. So I was always at their house, making dinner, helping them with homework, putting them to bed. I mean, this went on for like a year and a half, 2 years, until their mother, fell in love and got engaged and married a new guy. But even after that happened, I mean, I was the weekend dad, which oddly, maybe not oddly, I was probably a better father because of it, because we could get deep into that, but I was the fun guy. We went to the zoo, we went to the beach, we had a good time, and I wasn't necessarily the disciplinarian. I'm happier than I was. I'm healthier than I was. I think I wish I had somebody to talk to. Or even if it wasn't somebody to talk to, like a movie, something to turn to show a path that said, maybe it will be all right. I mean, I think if I went back to myself then, I would say, it's going to be better than you could imagine. And you're going to be fine. And you're going to thrive. Like, take the leap, Because it was terrifying and awful, but it was necessary. And it changed my life for the better. It also changed my children's lives. I mean, in a lot of bad ways, just in terms of, as a family that breaks up, you're going to have challenges, but they also learned how to pivot and adapt. And I think there was something valuable in that for them. And to see that, like, sometimes you have to make hard decisions in life. Sometimes those decisions will hurt, but it's for, a good reason. I think it taught them, maybe I'm giving myself too much credit, but it taught them, the value of being able to look yourself in the mirror, know that you were honest and had integrity. And I take pride in the fact that I didn't do anything. I was faithful to my marriage, to my vows. I didn't do anything to mess that up. I stood tall and marched forward. And I had a cousin ask me, if you'd never done anything, how did you know? Which I guess is a valid question. Which, you could say, well, how does anyone know? You know that you're straight. Or, did you have to sleep with a man to figure out that you were straight? Probably not. But I knew, but it was an interesting, oh shit, what if I didn't? What if this was an overreaction? It wasn't. I think deep down, anyone who's going through that knows what it is. But yeah, that was my leap of faith. It's very dark before it became light.